The biggest challenge, I suppose, with making something happen in terms of especially cooling is the chassis itself. And by designing our own and having that ability to have water cooling, liquid cooling in them, that's the biggest challenge, I think. Yes, we do work closely with ASUS in terms of what we'd like to see. Can we have this feature? Can we have that feature? And they do listen to us. I think the timescale can take a long time for things to actually happen. But I think the easiest thing, which makes the biggest difference, is the actual chassis, because you can put a different fan somewhere else, or you can have a different location of where the hot swap bays are, or whatever it might be. That's the easiest thing for us to control.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Making It Happen by Sims. As we round out the year now, we very much continue our theme of server and enterprise-related discussions. This time, we're welcoming the founder and CTO of the Serve Group, Richard Parry. Richard, thanks for joining. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. Brilliant. So, what we really wanted to do today is just give our audience an insight into the Server Group and the things that you guys are really doing down there. I think my understanding is it's a company that's evolved over time, with the inception being around 2006. So I think before we get into the Serve Group, it'd be awesome just to give a bit of a background into yourself and your own career, and then we move into how the group's developed along.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on how long you got, really. But I mean, I started out, to be fair, I mean, I've always been into technology, primarily electronics, to be fair. So, when I was like 9 or 10, I was actually repairing VCRs for friends and family, and, getting old broken TVs and things like that. And I kind of started just with electronics and just fixing things. And it wasn't until I was actually doing a paper round, and I was going by this company local to me, and they were basically, I saw all these tower computers, remember when they were sticking off your desk halfway up the ceiling. I remember tower PCs like that, and I was riding by there, and they came out and questioned me, and like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, I just like the look of all these computers. And they said, well, come on in, and we can teach you what they are. And basically, they were a software company, so that's kind of where I then started off. So after school, I was going into this company. I was learning technology, but I was and computers, but I was also learning programming, because they were a web design and web development company. They did a lot of other things as well as that, but they were a creative agency in effect. And basically started off with that. And I actually started with them the day I left school. They'd already given me a job offer, and I became their programmer. And over 5 or 6 years that I was with them, I became a programmer for them, their senior programmer, took care of all their IT, and it basically went from there. And then in about 2006, I actually then left there and started my own web hosting company. I started a web design and development company, and I also started what was then formerly known as ServerCase. I had all these different businesses. ServerCase was actually just a little sideline thing, just giving me a bit of cash on the side. But I was primarily running a web hosting company and a web development company, and doing all that sort of stuff. And it kept me busy. I enjoyed it, but then eventually I was like, well, I want to spend more time on ServerCase, and I saw more of an opportunity. I could see that it could be potentially more profitable, a bit less stressful than being in the sort of the web design and development sort of arena. I was losing faith in sort of wanting to work on that stuff, so I just ended up getting into more into ServerCase. So I actually eventually just sold off off the hosting, and the web development companies, and I focused entirely on ServerCase. And that was basically 2012 that sort of happened. We got our first, little warehouse building. It's like 600 square foot. I like to call it a shed, really. It was not a business park, but it was a shed, really. And you got to start somewhere, haven't you? And then, about a year later, things were going well. We got a second unit on that estate, just a couple of doors down, another 600 square foot. And then another year later, we'd had another 600 square foot unit, and 1,800 square foot. It sounds like not a lot, but it got us through what we needed to do. And we progressed loads. And then in about 2016, we thought, right, we can't get any more units on this estate. Let's go and go to where we are now. So that's 10,000 square foot is what we got. It's a much bigger facility, and we've got 2,500 square foot of actual production space. We've got about 1,000 square foot sorry, about 2,500 square foot of office space, and the rest of it's warehousing. And and we've really molded into this building that we've got here, and it's taken us to the next step. But server cases where it all began, and it was just selling server cases. That's literally all it was.
Right. Okay.
But what we found out was that over the years we could do a lot more than that. We could do the builds, because of my experience with computer building. Building a computer is the same as building a server in effect. It's just with more high quality components. And we found that we were doing more and more server builds, and then that's when we started to do a transition more into building than selling chassis. So whilst we've got two, a big warehouse here, 7,500 square foot of warehouse full of chassis and components, what we're finding is we're no longer just distributing those cases, which is what that kind of ended up turning into, but we
Yeah.
actually turned into actually selling full solutions.
Sure.
And people were coming to us for that sort of stuff. And then we created another brand called Server Store, to try and really make people understand what it is that we're doing, and that is we're focused. We do more than just server case, because everyone saw server case, they thought, oh, we just sell server cases. It was quite hard to
Yeah.
teach people that we also do server builds as well, custom
Right.
serve solutions. And again, we struggled with Server Store a little bit, with people understanding what it is that we do. So then we created an overarching brand called the Server Group, and that's
Right.
what we are known as right now. So we've got our divisions, which is Server Case and Server Store. And then we've got our brands, which is Logic Case, which is our Chinese chassis, and we've also got Velocity IX, which is our custom end-to-end sort of server builds that we do.
Hmm.
But what we're finding, we're actually going backwards, and we're sort of de-evolving in terms of our brand. We're actually merging everything now. We're actually in the process of doing this into one brand, and that is the Server Group. So we've got a new logo, which is the server.group, because that is basically our domain. That's what we do. And we are custom server solutions. That's what we do. It's what we specialize in.
Yeah.
We still sell the chassis. We still distribute them for big brands like Inwin and things like that, and Shimbro. But we're really focusing on server builds, because that's really where we're going.
Yeah, no, great, and that's very thorough overview of the server group and where you've gone in terms of timeline. So I think I'll probably just take it back to the start with server case, and we walk through it to now. And I think what I would like to know is, obviously, you evolve from the distribution to the server builds, but in terms of your place within the IT ecosystems, talk me through the customers you were serving in the start to where you're serving now, and the industries that you serve, the variety of that. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so as I say, it started with just selling cases,
Yeah.
and really what we were then starting to do was the upsell, and a customer would just order a chassis from our website from us, and we would call them up, through our salespeople here, we'd call them up and say, hey, did you know we also do a build? And they were like, oh, we didn't know that. And this is where all the Server Store brand and the trying to educate people exactly what we do came from, because they
Yeah.
just didn't understand. They just thought we do server cases. So that's kind of the natural progression of what it was that we would just call them up and we'd ask them, do you want us to build it? And some of them would say, oh, well, yeah, we build it ourselves, but we've got too much to do. We don't really want to do it anymore. Or some people would still just say, yes, we want to do it ourselves. So that's kind of how it just progressed into we would start doing their builds for them, and some
Hmm.
companies have literally just got rid of, or they've moved around departments just to say, hey, it's not, there's no point in us doing the builds. Let's get the professionals to do it, because for one thing, if they buy a server from us, they get a 3-year return to base warranty standard. Now,
Yeah.
normal components for pretty much everything just has a 1-year return to base on it. So if we build it for them, they get a 3-year return to base, but they also get, of course, peace of mind, things like we do a 24-hour stress test.
Hmm.
So we put it through quite a lot of testing, to make sure that as soon as they get that machine, subject to any potential damage in shipping, it
Yeah.
will be 100%. So that's kind of why people buy from us. And of course, there's the service and the support and all the rest of it that goes with it. In terms of, to answer your question on the type of customers that we're dealing with, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the reasons why I think that we're doing well, is that we're not focusing on just one market. We'll deal with pretty much anybody now. if they want a server from us, we can sell them a server, but we do specialize in certain markets. We do tend to work primarily in the channel. So, we work primarily with companies like ISVs.
Yeah.
So they develop the software that wants to go onto these bits of kit, and then they don't really understand or even want to deal with the hardware. So they'll come to us, and what we'll tend to do mostly is just hardware for people. We'll
Mm.
still install an operating system on there if they want, but tends to be that they just want the hardware, and that's it. Some people will do a full wraparound, so we'll do box print, we'll do all the branding, we'll even print manuals for them, things like
Yeah.
that.
Mm.
And we'll even ship it to their customer white label, so it's like a full, the full service.
Yeah.
And some people do want that. So for some very big companies, they get us to do large quantities of builds, and then we just ship it to their customers in effect.
Mm.
The full fulfillment sort of 360.
Yeah.
But yeah, we work in pretty much any kind of market, but there are certain markets, things like CCTV, that we do a lot of builds with. They go into high street retailers, all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah.
But also, we're moving a bit more into companies that do things with GPU. So not necessarily just AI, because I know that
Hmm.
is an emerging technology, but we do a lot more things with things like that GPUs could be used for. That could be actually outputting a video, or it could actually be computational something.
Yeah.
These machines can go into VR simulators, for example, so an actual output that video, or the video could be used for a combination, like a hybrid of, like, they might have a video wall, but it might be displaying that video wall, but it might also be sort of working out some sort of computational information, like we do something with surgeries.
Yeah.
So they'll actually do live surgeries and things like that, or training through these video wall systems. And the GPUs are there to actually support all of that. It's quite interesting. So
Yeah.
there are people out there that do a lot of AI. We're trying to get into that a little bit, but we already have a lot of other markets that keep us busy as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm just trying to obviously understand all of that, and it sounds like you spread quite about there. But obviously, it's from my understanding, you're probably working with firms that are looking, the ISVs that are obviously putting your kit into data centers or in server rooms. But is there potential there where you're working with more industrial customers who need more of a sort of rugged device? And I think that's primarily a lot of the AI that's happening at the moment is happening at the edge. As such, these edge devices out in the industrial, and in if we look at the cloud or the data center market, it's primarily happening at the hyperscale level, right? It's yet to come down. So is that sound about right? You're sort of enterprise, industrial, or is it kind of, you've got the complete mix?
I would say we have a complete mix. I think that we're very competitive when it comes to competing with Dell or HP, but
Yeah.
you find that a lot of, say, web hosting companies, that tends to be who put equipment into data centers. They'll be the ones who tend to want to just go with Dell and HP because it's all they've used for all the years, and they
Yes.
don't really like to change. There are some exceptions. There are customers that we do tend to work with, and it does take a while, and we push our solutions. That might be Supermicro, it might be Asus, or ASRock Rack or something like that, and then they'll look at it and go, tell you what, it's like a 10 grand saving per server. Let's
Yes.
give it a go, and blimey, it's actually much better. We get better support because Dell and HP support, it can be quite tricky, and they can get the better support from us. We can still offer that on-site warranty, all that sort of thing as well. But we do find that the people who stick servers in data centers tend to be, there might be cloud providers, or there might be web hosting companies.
Yeah.
However, if they're doing something that's GPU or compute or something like that, they tend to actually still do that sort of thing on premise. We find
Yes.
a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of our customers actually have a room in their facility somewhere that has the power, the cooling, all that sort of stuff to provide that. And then, of course, if it might be somewhere in like a university where GPU and compute and things like that is also going into,
Mm.
they'll also have all those facilities. So doing GPU and compute, things like that, in a data center is actually very expensive because of the power and the cooling and things like that's required for it. It's
Yeah.
much cheaper to do that pretty much on premise. Yeah, so we are finding that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, I've worked, rack space can be expensive essentially at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
power, everything comes at a cost. But obviously, it's the benefits are there for DCs that the network and the uptime and things like that. So everything comes with pros and cons. So no, that's really, really good insight. And I think discussing some of your systems now, I think let's get into the components that sort of make up your systems,
Yeah.
specifically the level of the components you use, whether that's enterprise or consumer or anything like that. I think I'm unaware, so give me a bit of a rundown on that and just how you work with the vendors, and particularly right now might be okay, but sometimes the supply chain could be quite tricky. And how do you flourish when it is so tricky? What's your strategy there?
So a lot of our customers are just in time sort of purchasing. So
Mm-hmm.
whilst we do a lot of project work, a lot, we do have such a big mix of customers. Sometimes they want 30 servers, and sometimes they might want one. We do have a good supply chain. We work obviously very well with Sims for things like SSD and RAM, and you guys have obviously you've excelled. We've worked with other people who have supplied Micron, but we're now working primarily with Sims in terms of the Micron supply. You've always got it in stock. If you haven't got it in stock, we'll pre-order it, and we're actually starting to put more and more of it actually on our own shelf as well. So the stuff that sometimes can be a bit harder run rate, a bit harder availability from you guys, or from just generally Micron, we're actually starting to put that more on the shelf, and that's generally just SSD.
Yeah.
RAM is pretty available. In terms of everything else, we're an ASUS main partner, one of their system integrators, so we do hold quite a lot of stock here. But if we don't have it in stock here, we can get that pretty easily. We work with ASUS very closely in terms of forecasting, things like that. But that's also the same with other suppliers as well. So we have a really good network of suppliers, all tier one that we deal with. We do forecast as much as possible, and that's very difficult because our customers can't forecast to us,
Yeah.
but we still forecast as much as we can. That does mean sometimes we're putting stuff on the shelf for much longer than we'd like. However, it does mean that we'd actually win that order, because when that customer comes out of the blue after having had a quote for 3 months, they eventually turn around and say, "Oh, I need it tomorrow." And we're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, that's no problem." Majority of the time we can do that now. Years ago, that was a lot harder. We couldn't put stuff on the shelf, but as we've grown over the years, we've had that sort of cash to actually put more and more components on the shelf,
Yeah.
and including the higher ticket items, things like CPUs, things like that. In terms of actual how things are sort of changing though, we're doing a lot more AMD systems. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot more people are doing that because there's hardly any availability of Intel. We're just not really doing much Intel these days. AMD as a CPU provider, much much better. The availability is great, the pricing is great, the service offering is great, and we're finding that a lot of manufacturers, such as even the ASUS, are just not making the bare bones, the
Right.
systems and
Yeah.
motherboards for Intel platforms because they're just dropping off. People aren't buying enough of them.
Mm.
So yeah, we're doing all right with that stuff. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And just outside of supply chains and things like that, obviously, let's just get into a bit about you now as a CTO and leading that. So outside of that, from a technical standpoint, when you're developing these servers, what are the sort of challenges that you see and how you've overcome them at the moment?
So everything, I mean, everything that we do is custom basically for our
Yeah.
customers. That's why we're so good at what we do.
Yeah.
They come to us and they'll tell us what they want. They tell us what they want right then, and they tell us what they need it to do in the future.
Hmm.
And I think that's why our custom server offering is better than say ASUS, sorry, better than HP or Dell, because we can use ASUS bare bones or ASRock bare bones or something like that to give that expandability that you just can't really easily do with an OEM like Dell or HP. So they'll come to us, and we'll put together that spec. And it's one of the things that I really enjoy doing is talking to customers, actually understanding what it is that they're looking for, what their
Yeah.
challenges are, what sort of budgets they've got to work with, and we'll talk to them and we'll understand exactly what they want, and we'll deliver exactly what they want within budget, within time, within the spec, to give them what they're after, and that basically gives them what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of, so it sounds like you're still you're very hands on as a CTO, but
Yeah.
obviously you've grown a lot since 2006, and there's been a lot of change in the business, and you've developed and you've seen the demand within the customers and how things need to change. What's it been like attracting talent to do that alongside you and make all of that possible?
Yeah, very difficult. So back in the day, we were more interested in sort of quantity over quality of people.
Right. Yeah.
And over the years, I think we've really refined, our staff. The team here is amazing. We've we don't have a huge number of people, but it's more about the quality of those people. We'd rather have less people and but really people who excel in their fields. We've
Yeah.
got excellent people in our sales and support sort of staff, excellent people in finance. All the staff that we got here are really good at what they do. We've been through so many people over the years, and I think we've really understood how to spot the talent.
Yeah.
In terms of actually finding talent, it's still incredibly difficult. We're more in the Midlands sort of area of the country. We do find that people in tech do tend to be more in the south, sort of London or Basingstoke ways, that sort of stuff. So we do find it very difficult. I'm not going to lie, it is hard.
Yeah.
So it can take a long time. We do a lot of interviews to find the people that we want. But we do find that eventually, after persistence, we do find these people. And what's more important, of course, is that we keep them. So we do have a really nice facility. We're a good company to work for. We go out for meals. We enjoy. Everyone enjoys working here, and
Yeah.
most of the people are actually here have been here for upwards of 6 or 7 years. So we must be doing something right.
Yeah.
But yeah, finding people still very difficult. We've tried apprentices and things like that in the past, and it just doesn't really work for us. We've tried it, but we've done our best with that stuff, and but as I say, we've got a good team now,
Yeah.
and just growing naturally. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just mean obviously knowing what I know about you guys, the custom builds and what these people are able to work on is exciting. Like even from we're seeing a lot more now, and it's something I want to ask you about. Actually, I wanted to ask earlier is around liquid cooling and that within the servers that you do. And I know it's part of your makeup and your portfolio. Obviously, an exciting thing to work on and something that's growing in the industry. But what led you to adopt that? Was it just? I'm assuming it was customer demand, or was there other factors, efficiency goals? But I'm assuming it just always comes down to the customer demand, right?
Yeah, so what we found was customers wanted high-end performance CPUs,
Yeah.
usually desktop CPUs in rack mount systems, and there's nothing really out there that could do exactly what people wanted. You can't put a desktop CPU into a normal rack mount chassis and just have air cooling keep it going. It'll just overheat very quickly. So I actually basically designed our full range of chassis. So we've got a 1U and a 4U rack mount chassis, which
Hmm.
we do a lot of builds into, but we also just sell them on their own. But I designed those specifically so that, especially the 4U chassis, so you can actually have a different type of cooler in there. You could basically choose any cooler, all-in-one cooler off the market and just plonk it in there. So that
Yeah.
might be a dual 120 or a dual 140, or you can potentially even put like a single 120 or a single 140 cooler in there. It
Yeah.
allowed people just to basically just do it that way. So I did that. So that we could basically put a desktop motherboard into a rack mount chassis. So we've got a 1U model as well, and that allows say things like the AMD Ryzen's, specific models of that. I mean, some of them still can't be cooled in 1U, but we've still got the AMD Ryzen sort of availability in
Mm.
Intel, sort of Core i7 or i9, in 1U. I'm actually in the process right now doing a 2U model as well,
Right.
and that's really the sweet spot, I think, because that's what people want, in terms of they can fit a GPU in there, they can have like redundant power supply a lot easier, and they can have a higher end CPU like a really high end Ryzen 9 or something like that
Yeah.
that would otherwise just cook itself in rack mount, but with the right size cooler, because in 1U the liquid cooler is actually quite small,
Yeah.
and of course that has a limit. In 4U, of course, you can have pretty much anything, and you can
Yeah.
have some big fans. But in 2U, it's just the sweet spot between the two. And of course, for rack density, things like that, it's what people are asking for. So I'm literally in the process of having that, a prototype made for that right now. So
Awesome.
sometime early next year, that'll be coming out. But yeah, as you say, it is complete demand. People want performance in rack that in the smallest amount of density that they can possibly get it in. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of things like immersion cooling, we're also looking at that as well.
Yeah.
That's a very specialist thing, though. To be fair, it's not very widely adopted at the moment. Asus has got some bare bones already made that you can actually plonk straight into immersion cooling. But the challenges with things like that are, of course, even though Asus will support the bare bone in terms of warranty for, I think it's a year. No other manufacturer other than Asus currently does that. Supermicro
Right.
don't do it, but unfortunately, at the moment, all the components that go into it are not going to be covered under warranty when they're stuck into immersion. So
Mm,
I think as once that's been sorted out by manufacturers, that they can, I think once they've educated themselves that
mm,
actually sticking that component in a special dielectric fluid is actually
mm,
not going to break it necessarily.
mm.
It's probably more of what it's going to be used for that might break it, not so much the fact that it's in liquid. So I think when people understand that, I think that immersion cooling technology will skyrocket, and from an efficiency point of view, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's quite interesting. Is obviously you're very close to the end user and what someone wants from a system. It's very custom. I'm assuming, do you work quite closely with vendors and manufacturers to give feedback on what they need to be doing with their product to make certain things happen to allow you to facilitate this kind of demand?
Sometimes, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously, we're a manufacturer in terms of the chassis,
yeah,
so we actually get those chassis done to what we want, and that's
mm,
probably one of the hardest parts, because you can't really say much to Intel, you can't really say much to AMD,
yeah,
or ASRock or even Asus. So those manufacturers don't really have much you can do with them. But
right,
the biggest challenge, I suppose, with making something happen in terms of especially cooling is the chassis itself, and by designing our own and having that ability to have water cooling, liquid cooling in them,
yeah,
that's the biggest challenge, I think. Yes, we do work closely with Asus in terms of what we'd like to see. Can we have this feature? Can we have that feature? And they do listen to us. I think the
hmm,
time scale can take a long time for things to actually happen, but I think the easiest thing, which makes the biggest difference, is the actual chassis, because you can put a different fan somewhere else, or you can have a different location of where the hot swap bays are, or whatever it might be. That's the easiest thing for us to control.
yeah,
In terms of a motherboard's a motherboard, isn't it?
yeah.
It might just be, oh, we'd like to see an extra M.2 slot on there or something like that, because we often get demands for that perhaps, but that's really all we can kind of do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's brilliant. This has been fantastic. I just think there's a lot going on with hardware right now, and you're very much in the depth of it and understanding what the customer demand is. But as we know, AI is very prominent now, and it has been for a while, and it's going to be there in the future. But just to round off the podcast, just from a hardware perspective, what are your predictions for hardware in the next sort of in a few years, and also server groups role in that really?
Yeah, so years ago, cloud came
Mm.
out, didn't it? And I
Yep.
remember people cynically sort of saying, "Oh, there's not going to be any need for hardware anymore. Everybody's going to move their server out of their office. Everyone's going to go into the cloud." And indeed, that's happened. Software as a service has taken over massively. However, people still need hardware in their offices.
Mm.
Still need hardware in, to do all of these. Different sort of things, CCTV, or it might be, something goes into universities for learning. I mean, there's so many different uses of hardware. But what we're actually finding is that everyone made that sort of, they were all very interested in cloud. They moved to cloud, and then they were like, that's actually getting really expensive.
And it's really
Um,
hard to get out of.
Oh yeah, well, kind of, but it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Primarily, they've spent a lot of time getting into the cloud, setting it all up, getting the security right, getting experts to make it all happen, and then they're like, that's actually really expensive,
Yeah.
and they're actually going back out of the cloud.
Yeah.
We're finding that a lot more daily.
Mm.
So people are actually coming to us and saying, we don't want to do the cloud anymore. We want to go back to on-premise. Now, on-premise doesn't necessarily mean physically a server in their office somewhere. It's going back to the data center
Yeah. It
sometimes
could
for
be colo,
people.
right? Yeah.
Exactly, that's right. Now, data centers are popping up all across the UK. It's a massive booming industry. It was in the news only recently, of course, wasn't it, that the government is going to be backing data centers and actually, making them a critical service as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So, really, the government is now actually spending some significant time and resource on recognizing the importance of data centers. That they're giving them more permission to build more of them, and of course, the UK infrastructure in terms of power is being upgraded to support more data centers. So data centers in terms of hardware and things like that is critical now. People are moving back to physical hardware. So in terms of us, we're very happy because of course people are wanting more hardware. It's only going to increase. So that's a positive, of course. And to answer your question regarding AI demand, so I think a lot of people thought that AI was a bubble that might burst. But actually, I think that it's not going to at the moment. Unlike the original dot-com boom, I don't think it's quite like that, because it's not a technology that everyone was getting into and not really knowing about. People doing AI are really knowing what they're up to. They're really developing the right technologies. It's really making a big difference. Of course, this all comes down to, of course, they're the software in effect. We're doing the hardware. We know how to do the hardware, the GPU sort of servers, the compute, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so in terms of where AI is going, I think it's just going to continue. Really, I think it's gone past that point of that bubble bursting.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to go backwards now. If anything,
No.
it's going to take over.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think you're right. Okay, well, look, brilliant. Thank you for joining us today, Richard, and giving us that great insight into the business and where you're going and how you're consolidating things and just everything there. So really appreciate you coming on. We look forward to seeing your journey, and yeah, we will speak to you soon. So thank you.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, and again,
Cheers, Richard.
for having me on.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.